Okay, I think we can start as people are flowing in. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. Thank you all for being attending our 5th webinar of the Africa Teachers webinar series. And this session will focus on ensuring that learners acquire the skills they need, the role of teachers, which will focus mainly on foundational learning. Before we dive into the session, please allow me to set some general housekeeping rules. First of all, we do have interpretation ready. If you can find the little globe on your screen and you can pick the language you prefer. Secondly, the recordings and PowerPoints will be made available after the session. Will be surely available next week, and I'll send an email to announce that. Lastly, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to comment it in the chat box or the Q&A function on your screen. Thank you all. And without further ado, please allow me to introduce Mr. Wouter van Dam to give us the opening remarks. Wouter, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Camelia. Good late morning, early afternoon, or afternoon for some of you. On behalf of the European Commission, I want to welcome everybody, and I think my camera is still off, so let me try to get me on. Yep. On behalf of the European Commission, I want to welcome everybody to this 5th webinar of the African Teachers webinar series. My name is Wouter van Damme. I'm Policy Officer and Education Expert at the European Commission's Directorate General for International Partnerships. And in my role, I'm one of the persons responsible for setting up and monitoring our investments in teachers in Africa. You might know that next to many bilateral investments in African countries, the EU supports teachers, teaching and learning, also through the European Union's funded Regional Teachers Initiative for Africa, the so-called RTIA, and also through our contribution as a main donor of the Global Partnership for Education, the GPE. Through our Global Gateway flagship, the Regional Teacher Initiative for Africa, we support ministries with technical assistance on teacher policy development and teacher development. We support innovation and scaling of good practices on teacher development in the field of pedagogy, in the field of gender-responsive pedagogy, green and digital skills. We also support teacher-related research and teacher-related regional policy learning. It is in this Regional Teacher Initiative for Africa framework that we, together with other partners, support this webinar series with the purpose of informing and in discussing important teacher matters in Africa. This webinar is part of a monthly webinar series with registration and materials available on the UNESCO IGBA website. And webinars are typically organized by groups of 3 on specific topics. And we are again very happy to see many of you joining today, because these kind of dialogues are set up to inspire policy development and implementation on teacher matters in the content. When I say we, I refer not only to us as the European Commission, but also to all sponsors and partners that make these webinars possible. And these are all partners of the European Union Regional Teachers Initiative for Africa, the Global Partnership for Education, Knowledge and Innovation Exchange, that's a joint endeavor with the International Development Research Centre Canada, the Africa Federation of Teaching Regulatory Authorities, AFTRA, and the African Union. And last but not least, of course, also UNESCO IGBA, which manages this series, and I want to specifically thank them for making this happen once more. But back to the topic of today's webinar, ensuring that learners acquire the skills they need, the role of teachers in that, which we programmed as part of the series on improving teachers' policies and practices under the African Union's new Continental CESA, the new Continental Education Strategy for Africa from 2026 to 2035. Today is the second session in this unit, and we will focus on ensuring that learners acquire the skills they need and the role that teachers play in that. More specifically, we will be going into approaches to strengthen foundational learning in Africa through, for example, teaching at the right level, structured pedagogies, situated learning, and more importantly, preparing teachers for the development of foundational skills. We cannot subscribe again how important this focus on learning for all is. This is about quality education for all, and in times where education financing is under pressure, both on the side of national governments as well as from development partners, it's even more important and in a way also inevitable to reflect on the effectiveness and efficiency of our approaches. Today's topic is at the core of the quality education question, and we once more have a very interesting lineup of speakers for you all. So thanks again, and I wish you all interesting learning and discussions today. And with this, I give the floor, I think, to Quinten for the keynote address. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Walter. Indeed, we have a very interesting lineup of speakers. And please now allow me to invite Dr. Quinten Walden from UNESCO ICBA to give us the keynote speech. Quinten, please.
Thank you, Camilla. I hope you can hear well. So what's interesting with this webinar series is that the keynote is actually not the most important contribution. It makes it also easier to do. And we had another keynote speaker, but unfortunately he could not join, so I'm kind of stepping in. So what I'm asked to do in about 8 minutes, so I will check that I keep in the time, is to provide some broad remarks to introduce the topic of this webinar, which is really about foundational skills. And then we will have much more detailed presentations from different colleagues, UNICEF, World Bank, ministries, and so on. So I have 8 minutes, roughly, maybe 7 now. So I thought I would make 8 points. So let me start with the first one, and I have here my notes. The first point, and it won't be surprising to you, is that the issue of foundational learning is key, and literacy and numeracy have huge benefits for the labor market. So, excuse me, I'm a bit sick. At ICBA, we are putting out very soon now a study on foundational learning and the role of teachers. And what we see is that the returns in the labor market, so the benefit in terms of wages of literacy, is actually higher than the benefit that you have from completing primary education. So it's a sign that often primary education is not as good as it should be. It's also a sign of the importance of investing in literacy. My second point is that it's not only about the labor market. When we look at a range of other indicators, fertility, how many children have, women have, under 5 malnutrition, under 5 mortality, whether the education of the mother has an impact on the health of the child, even things like autonomy for women in the household and so on. And when you use demographic and health surveys, you see again that having literacy brings an additional benefit to just completing primary education. Again, the returns to investments in literacy are very high. And then, although that I don't have detailed data to show it, I'm convinced that actually literacy and numeracy are fundamental for other types of skills that we want learners to achieve. The new Continental Education Strategy for Africa mentions social-emotional skills, mentions 21st century skills, issues related to STEM education and ICT and all of that. If you don't have foundational literacy, it's very difficult to acquire those other skills. So the first 3 points is that literacy is fundamental for the labor market, for health and social benefits, and for acquiring other skills. Now, the next 5 points, some of you may have heard me saying that before, but I just want to reiterate it. First, we absolutely need to strengthen the teaching profession. And that starts at a very broad level. We need to have clear career frameworks for teachers and school leaders as well. We need to have competencies associated to those career stages. And we need to have higher levels of pre-service education as well as continuous professional development directly linked to the competencies and the career stages. The teacher should be able to get training, to get recognized for that training, and that counts towards promotion. That's one point. The second point is that, especially when you think about continuous professional development, but to some extent also pre-service training, we need the trainings to be much more practical. There's a lot of literature that suggests that just having teachers go in some place and then learn things in a theoretical way is not going to improve pedagogy in the classroom. And some of those studies that exist recommend that certainly for in-service training, half of it should be practice oriented, coaching, mentoring, observation of the teacher in the classroom, and so on. That's the sixth point that I wanted to make is that we need to improve leadership. And if you think about it, it's really obvious. I mean, if I take a country like Ethiopia, we have 800,000 teachers. Difficult to reach all of them. We have a large numbers of school leaders, but less. And so the school leaders has a huge impact on what the teachers do, including whether the teachers remain in the profession. And we have quite a bit of data now to show that. So we need to have licensing for school leaders. We need to have very specific training. And again, this has to be very practical. My seventh point is that there are some issues related in many of the African countries to the share of teachers who are women and the share of teachers who are women and the share of school leaders who are women. And we and others have done detailed analysis of different data sets, and we find a positive effect of women teachers and women school leaders on learning for boys and girls alike. And there are lots of reasons that we can explain or suggest for that. I don't have the time to go into this. But in many countries, we need to really ensure that women get more slots, if you will, especially at the secondary level, but also for school leadership at the primary and secondary level. And finally, that's my last point, the eighth point. We need to understand in a very practical way what works, right? And Wouter mentioned a few things in his introduction: teaching at the right level, structured pedagogy. There are other other suggestions. And what we will have today is many of the speakers are going to go in that in some detail. So what does it mean practically, and how to do that well? What have we learned? So these were my 8 points, 3 points on the benefits from foundational learning, and then 5 points on some very broad suggestions in terms of how we can go about it to improve teaching and school leadership. I just want to finish with 2 very short, quick points. The first one is that together with this Africa Teachers Webinar series, we just launched at IGBA what we call an Africa Education Knowledge Platform. This is a searchable database that is on IGBA's website. If you Google UNESCO IGBA, you will find us. And we have, I think, right now about 400 resources that focus on teachers, publications that could be very useful to you in thinking about how to improve teaching and learning. And the last thing that I want to mention, Camelia did mention it, but after each series of 3 webinars, we are going to put out a knowledge kit that summarizes the webinars and also provides a number of resources from the Africa Education Knowledge Platform on the topics that were discussed in the webinar. So the first one on the topics that we did for the first 3 webinars, which was continuous professional development, is going to be available by early next week, and we will inform you in case you want to download that. We hope that is useful, and we are welcoming any comments you have on the Africa Education Knowledge Platform, on the knowledge kits related to the webinars, and of course, on the Africa Teachers Webinar series. Camelia, thank you. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Quentin. Thank you for the 8 points on the foundational learning and the 2 points on the resources we have at IGBA to support you for the other than the Ministry of Education staff and also educators and teachers and anyone related to education. We're here to support you. And one last point, adding on to that, We, as Kunta mentioned, we have units of 3 webinars, and as long as you attend the full sessions of the 3 webinars, you will receive a certificate of participation. Thank you all. And now, without further ado, please allow me to introduce Dr. Sahu from UNICEF to talk about the strategic reflection on foundational learning and numeracy and revisioning for 2025 to 2030. Rudra, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so very much, Camelia, and thank you so very much, UNESCO ICBA, for this opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon. And thanks also to Quentin for this informative, insightful, and reflective keynote, particularly on foundational learning. I don't need to repeat the benefits of foundational learning. Next slide, please. So I'm just going straight into the slide number 3, because I know that we have limited time. So we all know the how the foundational learning really not just in the labor market, but it is the foundation from all for other learning as well. However, we know when we know the, let's say, importance of foundational learning, but at the same time, 8 out of 10 children from sub-Saharan Africa cannot read with understanding by age of 10. And more importantly, it's not just about the magnitude of the learning poverty, but the slow pace of progress. For instance, let's say just 0.5% in last 3 years. This is really, really minuscule. That means we are not moving. And more importantly, when we, let's say, deep dive into the country data, it is showing through the simulation, some countries may require 30 years from now to ensure at least 70% of the children acquire those foundational learning. That means we need to wait 30 years to ensure at least 70% of our children acquire those foundational skills. And this is, we cannot wait that long. But at the same time, also in the equity perspective, children, particularly with the disability, children from the emergency context are way lagging behind. If this is the context, then we need to also understand what is the operating context for us. When we know our GDP is shrinking and we have stagnated economic growth, and we know now the ODA's allocations are also reducing or maybe minimizing in some context. And also we know we have frequent offset in terms of the climate, epidemics, conflict, and instability in our continent. And we have also substantial teacher gaps, around 7 million, particularly in the primary level of schooling. And also we have overcrowded classrooms. Sometimes it is 60:1, and many instances it's over 100. And also when we look at, let's say, the teaching learning resource materials, it's some cases it is 1:15. That means just one textbook for 15 children. And also the variation in allocation, particularly the public allocation to education, it varies a lot. And sometimes there's a low income countries, it's just $82 per child against, let's say, $8,000 in the high income countries. And also we know we have high instances of teacher absenteeism. It is varies from 15 to 35%. And also we know some instances we have low teacher salary, particularly in South Sudan and Madagascar, where teacher salary per month is even less than $20. Many a time it's not, let's say, regular. That means the teacher has to wait for 6 months to receive the salary sometime. So it's a really contributing toward the low learning poverty. Next slide, please. If this is the scenarios, then next slide, please, Camilla. So if that the scenarios, that means why are we in this situation? So I have few points already. I covered some of them. So just I'm highlighting what I have not said earlier. Particularly, when the universalization of elementary education came in, and the short-term and the temporary solutions become permanent systemic approach. For instance, let's say this temporary spaces, appointing teacher volunteers. Those are really leading to where are we now. And this is really affecting particularly the temporary learning spaces without proper infrastructure and appointing teacher volunteers without, let's say, sufficient training on the content knowledge. This is really contributing towards the learning poverty. And also already I mentioned about the teacher gap, and also we have ineffective utilization of the resources, particularly in the time on task, and the teachers mostly using, let's say, 50 to 60% of their time on learning. This is also leading towards learning poverty. And also we have substantial repetition, dropout, and TLM as well, particularly in the TLM case, many a time it's reaching schools after second semester. So this is really wastage and ineffective utilization of resources. And also we know how early childhood education is important, and we have just a third of the children are participating early childhood education. So this is also limiting the children's proficiency and acquire the foundational learning at the early stage. And also we have, let's say, the obsolete instructions, curriculum, and irregular assessment. Many a time the curriculum we are following, let's say, it's dated back to 1990s or early 2000. And also the learning assessment data, it's not regular when it is collecting, it's not really informing the policy and the planning and the practice. And more importantly, the financial space, and we know this is not adequate. And when we analyze 12 out of 21 countries in our region spend less than 4% on the GDP on education. So these are the main region where we are. Then also when we consolidate the evidence, go to the next slide, please. So yes, and particularly when we consolidate the evidence, what the trajectory indicates, and the trajectory indicates that the learning crisis is real, and it is worse than we think. And particularly every additional years is not really translating to learning. That means really the additional schools here are not translating to learning. This is one. And the second one, children fall behind early and then tend to stay behind. That means we need to have provide early interventions that to ensure all children master foundational learning. And also the insight number 3, what is coming out, expanding access to schooling will not on its own address the learning crisis. That means we must align the instruction to children's actual pace of learning, as Quentin mentioned about the teaching at right level, and all that will cover in my some of my slides and other presenters. And the insight number 4, what is coming out, we know we need to let's say address the inequity, but at the same time we know 90% of our children not acquiring basic foundational literacy and numeracy skills. That means just focusing on the disadvantaged children is not enough to address learning crisis. That means we need to focus and prioritize changes that can shift the entire education system. As learning crisis is universal, we need universal solution too. So the last insight what is coming out from the researchers is adaptation. That means learning profiles vary dramatically across the countries. Even you can see the huge variation across the school within the provinces or within the country. Within the district level, that means we must focus on the localized, tailor-made, and evidence-based solution. So this is what coming out from the researchers. Next slide, please. Okay, then again, I'm connecting to another piece of evidence, that is the GIF, that the global evidence evidence on education panel. They categorize, they let's say scrutinized over 30 to 100 initiatives globally, and they found or categorized those initiatives into 3 different buckets: great bias, good bias, and the promising bias. And within the great bias, when we know, let's say we have substantial amount of learning poverty, but the good news is we have solutions too, and that's from Africa. So the great bias, like you are teaching at right level, the structured pedagogy, the targeted instruction as coming are, let's say, defined as the great bias. Why great bias? Because those are cost effective, those are impactful, and those are quick solution to address the learning crisis. Next slide, please. Okay, this at just a few existing model, and just I'm happy to share in our region, 16 out of 21 countries are employing impactful practices on FLN, and some of the examples just I'm sharing. For instance, Madagascar, they're employing teaching at right level universal. That means all schools in the country. And also there is substantial improvement. We can see at least 18% more, let's say, increment in the reading skills as compared to where it is not being implemented. then also we can see Sosome, particularly in Kenya. Let's read improving the English and Swahili language reading skills. And also we know Zambia, they're implementing the catch-up, that is the teaching at right level approach, but they call it catch-up learning program. And you can see it is also helping children to learn better. So it's just few example, but more and more countries are now into the remedial approach of learning, that is the teaching at right level and the structured pedagogy. Next slide, please. And this is a snapshot kind of thing, which countries are who are doing which kind of intervention. And this, I'm not listing all the countries, but some of the sample countries. If the country is not there, it doesn't mean that they're not doing remedial learning. Next slide, please. So just I'm summarizing what is coming out. Let's say if it is working, why it is working. If it is not working, then why it is not working. So this is a synthesis of evidences from different research and the classroom observation and our interaction with education systems across. So it is working because it is evidence-based instruction. And it target children's level. It's not targeted to child's age or child's grade, but it is targeted to the level of learning. And it is working because it's easy to use teaching learning resource materials, and it is really low cost and localized. So it is we can see it is working. And also it is working because the way the teachers are engaging children into the teaching learning process, and also the support and guidance in material from the teacher, support and guidance material for teacher, particularly the lessons are structured and there are guidelines for the teacher. There are coach, mentors, and as Quinton rightly mentioned about the school leaders and how they provide, let's say, quality assurance, motivation, and mentorship support to the teacher. So this is a complete package. This is why it is working. If this is working, and it is in what context it is working? Actually, when it is working, particularly the teaching learning, the teaching at right level or the structured pedagogy, it is working really well in the small cohort of schools, because when you scale up, then you have really low bandwidth to support the individualized teacher. That means the coaching, mentoring, this is critical aspect. And when you open it to more number of schools, then the quality assurance, the quality of support, mentoring is really poor. That means if it is working, particularly in the small cohort of schools, then it is working in a manageable class size, particularly when the pupil teacher ratio is around 30-35, it is working. Then when it is substantially increased to, let's say, 60, 65 or 100, it's really unmanageable, and particularly to be attentive and provide individual support to that many children. Then it works when the teachers are really motivated, and the complete buy-in from the system and the school leaders, and also there are interventions from technical agency and the development partner. But at the same time, if it is not working, why it is not working? Because it is not, let's say, many a time perceived as a different program, not well integrated or coherence with the policy guidance, that the curriculum assessment and even the teacher development approach within the country. So that's why it is not working. And many a time it's not working because it lacks the implementation rigor that we call implementation fidelity. And there is a huge, let's say, variation. You can see how the program is being implemented across the schools. And many a time also it's missing accountability, because we don't have, let's say, robust regular learning assessment, longitudinal data to put accountability back on the system. So it is also one of the things why it is not working. And also we can see there is a huge missing link with the systemic code, that the budget, national plan, and allocation. So many a time the remedial learning perceived as a separate program, and this is an additional support from ODA and all that, but not really thoroughly planned within the national education system through the budget, plans, and allocation. And moreover, the psychological barriers, particularly the mindsets, and we know we have aging teacher workforce, some of the education systems, and particularly breaking those psychological barriers with the old school of thought and traditional way of teaching is really taking a toll. How we are really transforming the teaching learning practices and all that. So this is from my side. Thank you so very much once again for this opportunity, and I'm happy to answer the questions if there are any. Over back to you, Camelia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rudra. Thank you for this very comprehensive overview about learning difficulty and foundational learning in Africa, particularly. Next, please allow me to invite Dr. Paul Kakupa to discuss about beyond remediation, investigating the transfer of teaching at the right level strategies in regular classrooms in Zambia. Dr. Kakupa, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. I'll try to turn on my video, though my internet is very slow. Oh, it's telling me it cannot start a video. Okay, I hope it is okay. I can proceed. So I'm sharing, this is an ongoing work. We're trying to address the problem of learning poverty. Our learners are in school, but they're not learning. And the whole globe, actually, the whole world has made significant progress over the past 2 decades in terms of access to education. A lot of our learners are in school. Right now in Zambia, free education actually from primary all the way through secondary. So we have learners in school, but learning is not happening. Let's move to the next slide. So this is a standard I'm conducting to try to understand one of the programs that is being implemented to address learning poverty, which is TAO, learning at the right level. As we go further in the discussion or in the presentation, I'll unpack this. So I want to see what happens like beyond TAO. Do we see a spillover when teachers move from their remedial classes? Because TAO is a remedial strategy or methodology. It's not a mainstream thing, but it's a remedial strategy that is put in place in some schools, not all schools, as I'm going to show. And it has proven to work, like the previous speaker has shown actually. For literacy, it even improved by up to 25% and 18% for numerous. So to start the topic, I want us to reflect on the learning crisis that we all know about, and it's a concern of everyone who is in the sector, in the education sector. According to the World Bank, 70% of 10-year-olds cannot understand a simple sentence. They cannot read a simple sentence or even understand it. And if you look at the graph there, we compare the global average versus sub-Saharan Africa, where we are. We are at 89%. Okay, we are at 89%, the highest, I think. And this is not because of COVID, because yes, COVID affected us, but our learning poverty was already high. Actually, it only changed if you check the blue bar there, before COVID, it was at 86%. So it moved by, I think, 3%. So it was already high. So we cannot attribute this to COVID disruptions that happened. Next. But we also understand that COVID wiped out whatever progress we might have made before 2019. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay. Yeah. So as we are talking about learning poverty or learning crisis, this is not just an educational crisis, but it's also an economic one. There are projections that we could lose up to 21 trillion in lifetime earnings, like in future productivity, if we don't do anything about this learning poverty. So today's learning poverty will be tomorrow's earning poverty if we don't do anything. And that's why we should all be concerned. Next. Next slide, please. Okay. Yeah, so this is what I was talking about, that we had shorter school closures during COVID in sub-Saharan Africa compared to other countries outside the region, but our learning poverty is worse. And why? Because it was already high, even pre-COVID, it was at 86%. So our challenge here is rooted in structural, economic, and pedagogic barriers. So we have issues like overcrowded classrooms. We don't have adequate numbers of teachers and qualified teachers and motivated teachers, and so many other issues that we grapple with. Okay, lack of instructional materials and so on and so forth. However, we cannot reduce this problem to just these resources or lack of resources in our schools, because again, from literature we see that resources alone are not enough. Okay, resources alone are not enough to improve learning. So input-based policies have failed to work. For instance, I have examples there. In Peru and Colombia, they provided extra computers, and after doing their study, they found there was no impact. Providing extra computers had no impact on test scores. These computers were never even used. In Kenya, there was another experiment or another study where they had more teachers, like having extra teachers, and looking at looking at the effect or impact of that on improvement in scores or learning, in short. However, reduced class sizes again did not have any impact on test scores. Okay. There was also another program to equip schools with lots of textbooks. So they provided more textbooks in Kenya. Again, there was no impact on test scores. Actually, this one was advantageous to the top 40% learners, but not everyone. So it just worked for those who were already doing fine. So for those who were doing fine, they did better, but not for everyone. In India, they provided libraries, and then again, they saw there was no connection. There was no significant impact actually on test scores by just providing these resources or books or libraries. So it is something. There's something more. Next. And this is where innovations such as structured pedagogy, teaching at the right level, have come in to also focus on the teacher. So we may not just be input based, like we should not just focus on resources. We can have all the resources, but learning will still not take place. And we can tell from what has happened in our countries over the past few decades, like there has been there has been investment, like extensive investment in education, actually, in terms of resources, in terms of building more schools, in terms of employing teachers, but this has not translated into improved outcomes for learners. So we'll talk about teaching at the right level, that has which has shown promise, great potential, actually, to improve learning for everyone. And this started in India by an Indian education organization, Pratham, and the key thing in this methodology or strategy is to meet the learner where they are, okay, at their level, and not to impose the curriculum on them. So it's to follow where the learner is, and this has been empirically validated in a number of other cities. A number of studies have actually shown this to work. Even here in Zambia, we have conducted pilot studies that have shown improvements, like significant improvements in learning for everyone, like for everyone. And so we'll talk about this one. But before I talk about the context here in Zambia and the catch-up program, which is an adaptation of TAO, I want to go back to the literature. What does the literature tell us about tau? So when you go
Sorry,
to the
Dr.
literature,
Kakupa, because your time is short, could you please go straight into the example of Zambia, please?
okay. Thank you. So let's come to Zambia. So Zambia is the best example, actually, our case study for tau, because remember we were looking at a graph on learning poverty in sub-Saharan Africa. If you look at Zambia, we're at 99%. So 99% of our learners are in school, but they are not learning. Now that is scary. So it means only 1%. And when you compare with the other lower middle income countries at 60%, it makes Zambia a sad story. Like it's a sad story. Now, in terms of context, in Zambia, we have free education, like I told you, and we have up to 6.5 million learners. And since we have free education, we have like high pupil-teacher ratios, high classroom pupil ratios, and in some rural provinces, especially, five learners share a textbook. And this program, Catch Up, which is a Tau adaptation program, was introduced in 2016, but right now, so they started with 80 schools, and now we have 5,000 schools that have this program, Catch Up. And what is involved? The Catch Up program works with grades 3 to 5. So grades 3 to 5, every day after normal school hours, there's 1 hour set aside for remedial lessons. So these catch-up lessons happen after the normal school day. So just for 1 hour, and they alternate. Today it could be numerous, the following day is literacy, just like that. And here, the learner is at the center, like I said, the learner is at the center, and what the teacher is doing is to facilitate. There's a blueprint, like for a Tau class. They use local resources, materials. It starts with oral assessment, and these assessments continue throughout. And when pupils are put in groups, like for example, if they can only read a letter, but they cannot read a sentence, they're in their own group. It's not the same as tracking or sorting, because they can move between groups. So they can, as they make progress, they can move from that group to another one. So there's that flexibility, but the emphasis is on continuous assessment and using that assessment to inform decisions of the teacher. And then also take high impact materials like story cards, things that they can make actually within their schools, so they don't need high tech. And yeah, so what I'm trying to do in the study is to see whether these strategies that have proven to work actually in Tau classes are spilling over to the regular classrooms, because these teachers who are teaching in catch-up classes go back to their regular classrooms the following day. Okay, so do we see other learners benefiting from the skills that these teachers who are trained in Tau methodologies have? And what are some of the factors that could be hindering or maybe facilitating the adaptation or maybe retention or abandonment of these strategies altogether in non-remedial contexts? So these are some of the questions that I'm posing. And like I said, it's an ongoing work. And one thing that should come out of this is to test also the mechanism, like how does Tau actually lead to improved performance? Okay, in what ways? And one of my hypotheses in this study is through engagement, like looking at the methodology itself, the principles of Tau, they seem to increase or improve engagement, like the engagement in the interaction between the teachers and the learners. And one of the things that I'll do is to use an observation tool. It was formerly called Play, now it's Engage 2 by RTI. And I want to see in classes, in TAO classes, we will do observations in TAO classes. We also do observations of the same teacher after teaching in TAO, like when they go back to their regular classroom. Again, we observe and see whether they use the same strategies. And after that, after observing their class, we'll interview them to ask them why maybe they used some of the strategies or why they did not use some of the strategies from TAO. But then also we will observe engagement in these classes where there's a teacher who is trained in TAO versus classes where the teacher is not trained in TAO. So we have three types of observations. So we target to visit 40 schools and do 120 observations. So one teacher who is teaching catch-up is observed whilst teaching a catch-up class or a remedial class. And then the same teacher is observed teaching a regular class. And then another teacher who is not TAO trained will also be observed within the same school. And we also have interviews with school administrators and mentors, like catch-up mentors, to understand the factors that could be facilitating or hindering the transfer of strategies, TAO strategies, from remedial classes to the regular context. In the interest of time, I think I can end here. Yeah, so right now we've just gotten clearance, ethical clearance, and we'll be starting field work in September. So probably I'll come back to update you on how it is working. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kakupa, for giving us a picture about what's happening in Zambia and about your methodologies to study the effect of TAO in the classrooms and for the children and the spillover effect for the other children. Next, let me warmly welcome our first Francophone speaker for this series, Mr. Stanislas Kajimba, who's a National Education Inspector in DRC. Monsieur Stanislas, vous êtes là?
Oui, Madame Camilia.
Oui, super, oui. Vas-y.
Bonjour, bonjour, bonjour
Okay.
tout le monde. Bonjour les conférenciers, bonjour mes co-débatteurs, bonjour tout le monde. Vous me suivez? Camilia, vous me suivez?
Oui, 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 oui.
Vous me suivez, Camille? OK, merci beaucoup. Et bonjour et merci d'avance de l'attention que vous allez devoir accorder à cette présentation, une présentation autour d'un thème intitulé « L'état des lieux de l'appui de l'IFADEM dans la mise en œuvre des apprentissages mathématiques et ses incidences sur les apprentissages des élèves. » Ici, nous allons oser de manière parmi sur la situation et ses avantages sur les apprentissages des élèves. Pour y arriver, j'ai préféré la recherche comparative. Cela veut dire pratique des classes avant la mise en œuvre de l'approche par situation. Et deuxième dimension, pratique de l'IFADEM avec la mise en œuvre de l'approche par situation dans les systèmes éducationnels congolais. Alors, je vais commencer par les commencements. Pratique des classes avant la mise en œuvre de l'approche par situation. Je vais vous rassurer que du début jusqu'à la fin de la leçon, l'enseignant était en train de centrer son activité sur l'acquisition des savoirs. et savoir-faire, mais sans prendre en considération l'acquisition du processus qui va conduire à ces savoir-faire. Et il n'avait qu'une seule question basique à laquelle il devrait répondre, c'est apprendre quoi? Et il était en train de négliger une deuxième dimension plus importante, c'est apprendre comment. Si nous prenons la première dimension, c'est apprendre quoi et apprendre comment, ceci met l'enfant dans une situation où il doit s'expliquer. Voilà l'explication maintenant de la démarche méthodologique de la leçon de mathématiques. Dans une leçon de forme géométrique ayant pour sujet les périmètres du rectangle, l'enseignant conduit son activité uniquement à son objectif visé, être capable de trouver les périmètres du rectangle. Et dans les activités initiales, bien entendu, après les rappels et la motivation qui est toujours ordinaire, on présente l'objet d'étude sous forme d'une image ou bien on fait les semi-concrets, pas de situation de réflexion qui puisse faire appel à ses acquisitions et expériences passées et pourquoi pas même faire recours aux expériences de ses pairs et même de la personne de son environnement. Alors, cela était en train d'entraver le développement de ses compétences. Mais dans les activités principales et celles de fixation et de contrôle, les contenus matière portent essentiellement sur les rectangles qui a été fabriqué en carton ou bien en semi-concret. Et les raisonnements de l'apprenant, il reste limité entre les quatre murs. Et s'il faut aller plus loin, peut-être c'est jusqu'au niveau de la cour scolaire. Or, c'est dans une situation problème où l'apprenant est en train de se construire, de s'adapter et de se développer. Bref, il développe ses compétences lorsqu'il est dans une situation problème. Maintenant, nous allons aller à la deuxième dimension, les points 2. Avec la mise en œuvre de la situation problème, qu'est-ce qui se passe? Tout au long de la leçon, j'ai pris à titre exemplatif la leçon de maths fort. À chaque moment didactique, l'enseignant ifadémien fait attention à l'usage des concepts mathématiques. Et entrer par exemple à la géométrie, et aussi il utilise une situation. Je peux prendre le langage mathématique. Lorsqu'il parle de horizontal, donc c'est ce qui est perpendiculaire à la verticale. Quand il parle de calculer, nous sommes dans le langage purement mathématique. Mais aussi l'exemple d'une situation, quand nous sommes dans les activités initiales, outre vérification des prérequis, dans la motivation, on fait intervenir directement une situation. Et cette motivation-là, nous l'appelons une motivation situationnelle. C'est-à-dire une situation problème soumise aux élèves. Au bout d'une réflexion, elle déclenche des questions de découverte du sujet. Et la même situation-là, nous l'appelons situation d'amorce ou de départ. Mais je voudrais attirer votre attention par rapport à cela. La même situation, dans un cas, peut servir, la situation d'amorce peut servir aussi à une situation d'apprentissage ou bien situation d'intermédiaire qu'on peut trouver dans les activités principales. Comme les cas d'espèces ici, si nous pouvons aller sur la page suivante, l'exemple que j'ai préféré vous donner afin que vous puissiez comprendre de quoi est-ce qu'il est question, j'ai pris l'exemple d'un parent. Par manque d'argent et pour assurer les soins d'un membre de sa famille, papa résout de vendre la moitié de sa parcelle carrée de 30 mètres de côté. Quelle est la forme géométrique de la partie restante? et la longueur totale de ces côtés. Vous voyez que quand vous formulez un énoncé comme celui-ci dans une situation problème, l'enfant d'abord fait appel, il mobilise toutes ses ressources parce que vous comprendrez que l'enfant, par rapport aux données, par rapport aux opérateurs, aux objets et aux produits qui forment les éléments d'une situation, l'enfant se trouve devant une situation où il doit d'abord concilier ce que le texte lui dit par rapport à la forme même géométrique dont il est question. C'est ainsi qu'il doit d'abord faire appel à plusieurs opérations. L'opération mathématique qu'on appelle la division, parce qu'il devra d'abord diviser les carrés en deux, et la partie qui va lui rester, il sait que les côtés ne seront pas égaux, ils seront des AD égaux et parallèles. Et cette figure-là, d'emblée, sera appelée les rectangles. Et comme élément de réponse, l'enfant dira, notre parcelle aura la forme maintenant d'un rectangle. Et pour calculer la longueur totale, il s'agira maintenant du périmètre, parce qu'on doit connaître la longueur des quatre côtés qui sont des AD égaux et parallèles. Nous évoluons. Dans les parties principales ou bien les activités principales ou qu'on appelle communément développement, après la présentation de la situation d'apprentissage nouvelle, ou bien il peut toujours recourir à la situation d'amorce qui sera soumise aux élèves qui vont procéder par une lecture d'abord de la situation et présentation même des matériels didactiques. Nous allons passer à une compréhension globale pour aider les apprenants à comprendre l'ensemble de la situation problème, mais aussi comprendre les signes, voire même les mots, parce que dans chaque domaine, il y a un langage qui est approprié. À ce niveau, qu'est-ce qui est fait chez nous? L'enseignant ifadémien recourt à la situation réelle ou bien similée. La situation réelle, c'est quoi? Il peut faire une école promenade. Il sort les enfants des 4 murs vers la cour pour montrer à la forme dont l'objet de son sujet concourt à cela. Mais aussi, il peut prendre une situation qui est similée. Il peut s'appuyer, par exemple, sur un tableau, si le tableau a la forme d'un rectangle, ou bien il y a un autre objet, il peut s'appuyer sur cela. Comme dans les cas de figure ici, il s'agit bien de calculer le périmètre du rectangle. Et avec cela, les tableaux, généralement ayant la forme d'un rectangle, nous présentent quatre côtés qui sont des AD opposés, dont nous allons découvrir les dimensions réelles qu'on trouve dans les rectangles. Là, il s'agit de la longueur et de la largeur. Et pour calculer, vous voyez, j'ai présenté deux formules hein, pour dire que nous sommes sur une gestion axée sur les résultats. Le processus d'apprentissage dépend de la personne qui se trouve dans la situation dans laquelle vous l'avez placé. Un élève peut dire, je peux prendre longueur plus largeur, je vais trouver le périmètre de ces rectangles. Mais un autre apprenant dira, non, comme le rectangle a deux longueurs et deux largeurs, décidément, je vais prendre longueur plus largeur, le tout fois 2. C'est ainsi que quand nous arrivons dans la synthèse, l'enseignant ifadémien consacre cette partie à recueillir les réponses. Parce que dans la partie qu'on appelle développement, l'apprenant a fait recours aux connaissances des autres. aux acquisitions des autres, aux expériences des autres, parce que là, les enfants sont regroupés, sont mis en sous-groupe, ou bien ils travaillent en paire. Et dans la synthèse, l'enseignant ifadémien consacre tout son temps à recueillir les réponses relatives aux consignes qu'il a données, aux signes et aux formules, et aux données grâce aux décompréhensions. Mais qu'est-ce qui va arriver maintenant dans les activités de fixation et de contrôle? Il y aura soumission aux élèves d'une situation d'évaluation qui consiste d'abord à vérifier la maîtrise des savoirs essentiels et à examiner les degrés d'adéquation entre la théorie et la mise en pratique de celle-ci. Donc, ici, le contrôle va consister surtout sur la matière enseignée. Mais il y aura une étape qui va suivre un peu plus bas là-bas, que nous appelons situation d'intégration. La situation d'intégration, généralement, elle se fait en deux phases. La première phase, c'est qu'elle prendra en compte, comme nous sommes en mathématiques formes, et pour trouver les périmètres, voyez combien d'opérations mathématiques qui se sont appelées pour que l'enfant arrive à résoudre cet exercice. Mais la situation d'intégration un peu lointaine pourra intervenir lorsque l'enfant aura accompli au moins autant de séances au cours d'un mois, et c'est à la fin là-bas, si tous les enseignements, apprentissages qu'il a donnés, l'enfant a mobilisé, l'apprenant a mobilisé toutes les ressources afin de résoudre une situation problème. Voilà un peu les retombées de l'approche par situation. Et en conclusion, je vais y aller par une approche comparative. Nous disons que les pratiques de l'IFADEM dans les situations de classe présentent à ce jour des points qui sont forts. Et ces points forts, nous ne voulons pas les faire taire. C'est pourquoi il s'y est dénoté, entre autres, les mérites des généralisations de cette approche IFADEM dans les apprentissages en situation de classe. Parce que jusque-là, ce que je vous présente là, il y a des écoles qui sont ciblées dans lesquelles l'expérimentation est menée, mais il y a autant aussi d'écoles qui restent sans être touchées par cette approche. La mise en œuvre de l'approche situationnelle dans toutes les pratiques de l'enseignement-apprentissage en situation de classe. Lorsque l'enfant apprend dans une situation, en tout cas, il se construit, il s'adapte, il se développe, bref, il développe même ses compétences. Le renforcement de la méthodologie de l'enseignement-apprentissage de toutes les disciplines du domaine des mathématiques, sciences et technologies. Voilà, Camille, ce que j'ai préparé pour cette grande conférence. J'ose croire que vous m'avez suivi avec beaucoup d'intérêt. En tout cas, une fois de plus, pour moi de vous remercier pour votre attention soutenue à cette présentation. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Mr. Kanjima. Thank you so much for a very interesting session about giving us like concrete examples of how to do situated learning in math for some context that children can understand well. Next, please allow me to invite Laura Gregory from the World Bank to talk about how we can prepare primary teachers for the foundational learning. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm really delighted to be here, and would also like to thank the organisers for inviting me to speak with you today, and also the excellent speakers that we've heard from already. So my name is Laura Gregory. I work at the World Bank on global issues related to teachers. I'm going to focus the next 15 minutes on issues around that first stage of preparing primary school teachers for foundational learning. Next slide, please. So here at the World Bank, we're very soon to be publishing our first study of initial teacher education or pre-service teacher training. So I'd like to give you a little preview of that. And I'm going to talk a little about the role of initial teacher education in foundational learning. And then share 5 key principles for building effective systems of initial teacher education, and cover some points around the content and delivery of primary school ITE programs, and the field placements or practicums for teaching experience and practice, and look at what matters there. Next slide, please. So our study situates initial teacher education within the wider education system. And here you'll see a diagram that came out in 2018 in the first World Development Report that was entirely devoted to education. So that report highlighted that education systems need to be coherent and aligned around learning. And that relies on teachers who are well prepared and motivated. And our upcoming study also sees initial teacher education as a complex system within itself. Next slide, please. And we see that initial teacher education is a crucial element in the process of developing a strong pipeline of well-prepared and motivated teachers to sustain quality education. Our framework for strengthening and supporting the teaching profession for improved student learning situates initial teacher education among other important processes, structures, and actions that you can see here that are needed to enable an effective teaching profession. Next slide, please. We focus solely in the study on the development of primary school teachers. We've spoken with experts across the world, reviewed the literature. We've developed 11 in-depth case studies, of which 5 are from the African continent. In terms of the role of initial teacher education in foundational learning, I'd like to just draw out to focus on today's 6 key points. Firstly, it's clear that primary school teachers are central to children's development of the essential skills for their future success. And by those, we mean the literacy, numeracy skills, and those soft or non-cognitive or socio-emotional skills that everybody needs for success in their lives. And initial teacher education is the first stage of a teacher's career, and it's where they gain the core knowledge and skills for teaching and develop their professional identity. And it's where they lay the groundwork for their lifelong professional growth. It's actually probably the main opportunity to reframe new teachers' view on what teaching should be, breaking away from perhaps what they experienced themselves when they were at school. So those qualities that new teachers gain through initial teacher education enhance the effectiveness of educational investments and programs and initiatives that improve foundational learning outcomes that we've heard about earlier today. Another way to look at it is that without initial teacher education or quality initial teacher education, the alternative is continual compensatory training to fill the gaps. So across the world, institution-based initial teacher education, so that's teacher training colleges and university programs, are the most common path to becoming a teacher, though there's variation in the educational level of those programs across the world, with high-income countries mostly requiring a bachelor's degree or higher, and low-income countries mostly requiring upper secondary level, and sub-Saharan Africa being the only region that has lower secondary education level as the minimum requirement for teaching in some countries. And strengthening the quality, therefore, of those institution-based programs with sustained investments is essential for all countries, no matter what income level or education level that they have it at, to maintain a pipeline of well-prepared primary school teachers for foundational learning. But often we have to face some specific challenges in the supply and the preparation of teachers, such as the shortages of teachers that we're aware of in many countries. And other complementary and short-term strategies might be needed at the same time as continually strengthening those institution-based programs. Next slide, please. So what competencies do new primary school teachers need? Generally, there is a consensus that primary school teachers need to be equipped with the following. Firstly, subject matter knowledge, particularly language and mathematics, with mastery above the level that they will teach. And then the subject-specific and general pedagogical knowledge and skills, including an understanding of child learning and development, and practical skills in planning lessons, teaching, assessing, creating positive learning environments, and addressing diverse student needs. And an understanding of ethical considerations, responsibilities, and professional norms for teachers. So those are the things we need all new and all primary school teachers to have. Next slide, please. Our study led to 5 key principles for building an effective initial teacher education system. And these are, firstly, attract and select strong teacher candidates into initial teacher education programs. Secondly, provide relevant and impactful program content run by skilled teacher educators. Third, incorporate quality field placements or practicums for teaching experience and practice. Fourth is to align institutions, because there are several institutions involved in this, for responsive, efficient, and quality-driven initial teacher education. And lastly, to enhance quality assurance processes to maintain high standards in initial teacher education. So if you just click one more, I think for today's topic, I'm going to focus on the second and third principles. But I hope you'll find that others principles are useful to delve into once the study is published and available to you. Next slide, please. So what content should initial teacher education programs for primary school teachers cover? Well, basically, it needs to cover the development of those qualities that I presented 2 slides before. So there's a lot of similarities here. The programs should include enough subject matter knowledge development as needed for the student intake, with an emphasis on literacy and numeracy. If that is lacking among the student teachers when they come in, then bridging classes or remedial instruction should be included in the initial teacher education programs. And this can also be enforced through pedagogical studies, because one can learn the concepts deeply and thoroughly by learning to teach them. An initial teacher education program should also build subject-specific, so literacy and numeracy and other subjects, and general pedagogical knowledge and skills, and develop those strong professional identities of teachers. And they should foster a conceptual understanding of child development and the science of learning, effective teaching methods, and assessment strategies. And this is because, as in any field, there will always be advancements in the future. So it's not just about being able to do something, but about understanding the how and why. But also they should develop practical skills in planning lessons, teaching, assessing, creating positive learning environments, and addressing diverse student needs. And the content of IT programs should nurture a strong sense of professional identity, including the ethical considerations, professional norms, and collaboration, which is hugely important for teachers with colleagues in schools and with families. Next slide, please. Looking more specifically at initial teacher education programs for primary school teachers, should include, related to foundational literacy and numeracy, they should include the latest evidence-based approaches to the teaching of language arts, which includes listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and mathematics. And here's an example of the types of topics or modules that are often seen in covering these areas. So in language arts, we look at the foundations of reading pedagogy, the application of those research-based instructional practices at the word and text levels, and integration of reading and writing. In mathematics, it's those core areas of numbers and operations, algebra or patterns to begin with, pre-algebra pattern work, geometry, measurement, and data. And then generally the basic student assessment, differentiated instruction, and the selective use of materials and how to go about selecting materials and resources, including technologies. Next slide, please. And on to how that content should be delivered. Well, we see that ample opportunities for hands-on, deliberate practice for these student teachers should be included in these programs to help bridge the gap between theory and practice. And that is the core part of it. From theory to practice, both are needed and the bridge between them. And then secondly, the teacher educators should themselves model high quality teaching practices for student teachers to emulate. And then activities such as micro-teaching, observation, and lesson study should be integrated for deliberate practice and reflection. And the teacher educators themselves should have a deep understanding of subject-specific and general pedagogy. They should also have had teaching experience themselves and the ability to model high-quality teaching practices. And good initial teacher education programs will incorporate quality field placements or practicums. Next slide, please. This is my last content one. So field placements, they are not always impactful. So it's not just about having it or not having it. Here are some considerations for ensuring that those field placements or practicums can be impactful. They should be designed to progressively develop student teacher skills, gradually shifting them from observing to taking on teaching responsibilities within the classroom with that support from a mentor teacher. So we don't want the situation where student teachers are just sat at the back and watching for the whole time. Secondly, the schools that can provide the best learning opportunities for student teachers should be selected, but that's often hard to do. Very, very common for that to be a sticking point. And so if ideal placement sites are not available, alternative approaches include group placements, peer mentoring, and institution-based practice, even having children come to the initial teacher education institution. Mentor teachers in the classroom, who they're experienced teachers in the classroom, should be supported also through incentives and have their efforts recognised, given the importance of their role in supporting student teachers. And there should be an active role for initial teacher education institutions in those field placements, working together with schools to ensure a coherent learning experience for student teachers from theoretical to practice. And this helps to make the system more efficient and effective. And it can happen through initial teacher education institutions being involved in training and supporting the school-based mentor teachers, and by being involved in supervising the student teachers when they are on their field placements. And on my last slide, I just want to finish up with, I've given you a quick preview of our part of our upcoming study, but I'd like to end with this advertisement for a global knowledge exchange on teacher education and professional development that the World Bank is co-hosting with UNESCO's ICBA, the International Institute for Capacity Building in Africa, and the Learning Systems Institute at Florida State University. And we're really looking forward to providing this platform to dive deep into these issues. So please check out the webpage through that QR code on the screen and be in touch with any questions. And again, thank you very much for this opportunity, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura, for a great presentation about initial teacher education. So we are done with all the presentations. Thank you to all the speakers who have taken us through the severe situation about learning poverty in Africa, as well as TAR in Zambia, and a very vivid example of teaching math in schools in DRC, as well as the initial teacher education to prepare teachers to support the students in all forms. Next, so my colleague Marianne has been collecting the questions in the chat and also in Q&A box, and I will now hand over to you, Marianne, for leading us through the Q&A session.
Hello, and thank you so much, Camelia, for the transition. Thank you to the speakers who have gone so far. We have been getting some questions in the chat box, and I encourage everyone to ask more questions as you hear this Q&A session. So perhaps I can pose two questions to start with, one for Monsieur Stanis Kajimba, and then one for Dr. Paul Kakupa. And maybe we can go first with Monsieur Stanis and then go to Paul, if that's all right. We have one in French then and one in English, and then we'll move to the next two questions. Would that be all right, Camelia?
Yes, but let me make sure if Monsieur Kajimba, is the interpretation working for you? Monsieur Kajimba, est-ce que la traduction en français, ça marche pour vous ou pas?
Jusque-là, ça ne marche pas. Je vous ai écrit sur chat.
Ah, ok, d'accord.
J'attends votre réaction, oui.
Oh, wait, okay. Miriam, maybe could you please start with Dr. Kakupa and then
Sure.
yeah, thank you.
Sure. So, Dr. Kakupa, I'll ask you two questions then, because there were quite a few questions in your direction. I'll ask you two that you
Mais
can
qu'est-ce que vous en
consider.
dites?
Okay. So, Dr. Paul Kakupa, you're still with us? Yes, I
Yes,
see your
I'm
name.
here.
Okay.
Thank
All right. Thank you so much, Doctor. So, Doctor, I'm going to pose two questions to you. You had quite a few in the chat box. So the first two are, which strategic actions do you feel that ministries of education in Africa can actually take to enhance teacher preparation and professional development? So this is a question about what actions that ministries of education can take to enhance teacher preparation and teacher professional development, perhaps at a systems level. And the next question, it's related to that. What are your opinions about teachers working under poor working conditions, especially low salary? What do you think can be done about that? Perhaps by the same ministries of education in your first question. So really, this is a two-part question. What can ministries do to enhance teacher professional development and preparation? And to address poor working standards, especially regarding low salary. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you so much. These are very important questions, and these are the conversations that we are currently having. Just 2 weeks ago, we were meeting to discuss CPD framework development in Africa. Like most of the countries in Africa don't have CPD framework. So when we train teachers or when teachers leave college or university and we send them to school, we leave them on their own. Like we hope they will teach, they will continue to deliver the best, but they need to continuously learn. They need to be provided with support to continuously improve. So learning should not stop. So continuous professional development, if you check most of the countries, maybe you can check from your country if you have a framework, like something like a policy on CPD. In most cases, it's just happening haphazardly. Like it's not planned. Teachers don't know whether they should do it or they shouldn't do it. And so that's one way of developing teachers. So when they leave college, there's a step that most countries actually miss, induction. So we just orient them, okay, this is the classroom, and you start teaching on your own. So we miss that stage. And even after the first few years of teaching, we don't really emphasize the aspect of continuous improvement. In some countries, like in my country, we are developing a framework, and in that framework, we actually made sure that teachers' CPD is tied to other benefits, for example, renewal of licenses. And in some countries, maybe they don't even have these things, like teachers are not licensed, so they need to register. In Zambia, after pre-service training, you need to register. And once you are registered, for you to practice, you need a license. And that license expires every after 3 years. You need to renew it every after 3 years. And before you can renew it, you need to have satisfied a requirement that you should have met a certain number of points, CPD points, like you should have participated in a school-based CPD or any other form of CPD that is recognized by the Teaching Council. So that is one way. And then also the issue of working conditions. This is a big issue, even in Zambia here. We have rural schools where there are no, there's no accommodation for teachers. We send teachers there, but they don't have accommodation. They don't have these amenities, power, even phone network. This is a challenge, and also for women, when we send ladies to rural areas, they ask for transfers. The moment they reach there, they ask for transfers and they move to town. So our girls, like girls don't have role models in rural areas because the women don't work there. So this is a conversation that we should have, like how we can actually attract more people. From our example, like from our case in Zambia, what we do, when teachers apply, they have to sign that they are willing to be sent wherever their services are needed. And once they are deployed to that place, again, they must stay in that place for at least 4 years before they can move out or before they can ask for a transfer. But then also we have pegs, like different pegs. If you are working in a remote area, so we have remote allowance. We also have rural allowance, like so the remote areas are different from rural areas and then urban areas. So if you are teaching in a typical remote area, you get more, like you earn more than someone who is teaching in town or in an urban area. So we hope these are actually some of the things that can help. But then the best is to engage teachers, maybe to have a conversation. It can be nice to hear from them whether actually what they see as important is the salary or maybe just the government improving or taking development to those rural areas so that they are motivated. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, for your responses. And on that note, about your need to work with teachers to ask them what matters to them, I think we can make a connection to a comment that Miss Lola Kamiki made in the chat box just now, saying that no matter how much we improve preparation and development for teachers, we still have to focus on teacher motivation, which is a very complex topic. Teacher motivation is not easily improved from any one input. We need to work with teachers continuously on motivation. Now, I'd like to shift and ask a few questions to our French-speaking presenter, Monsieur Stanis Kajimba. There are 2 questions I would like to ask you. I hope you can understand me. Monsieur Stanis Kajimba, can you understand me?
Oui,
Okay.
pas de souci. En tout cas, je vous suis maintenant correctement.
Okay. I'm going to ask the questions in English, but my colleague Camelia can assist, and so can the translators if you need them in French. There are 2 questions. Number 1, how important is the role of national, maybe mother tongue languages in mathematics teaching in your country? This topic of languages with teaching and teachers has not been brought up yet in the meeting, so we hope you can speak about what is the role of national and mother tongue languages in mathematics teaching in your country. That's question number 1. Number 2, how can pre-service teacher education be improved in the teaching of mathematics? Because most of the teachers in primary school are not teaching learners even the basic concepts in mathematics. So how can pre-service teacher education be improved for the teaching of mathematics specifically? Those are your 2 questions.
Merci beaucoup de l'intérêt que vous avez apporté à ma présentation. Ce qui démontre les 2 questions que vous venez de soulever, elles sont fondamentales. Mais je veux vous rassurer que ici, au niveau du degré élémentaire, parce que l'enseignement, il est organisé en 3 degrés. La première et deuxième année, et les enseignements se donnent en langue maternelle. Mais lorsque nous faisons maintenant la transition au degré moyen, et on y mélange aussi la langue maternelle. Oui, on y mélange la langue maternelle, mais en s'appuyant surtout sur le français parce que c'est la langue d'enseignement. Mais c'est pour vous rassurer que lorsqu'il y a des difficultés, l'enseignant fait recours toujours à la langue maternelle. Oui, parce qu'il se trouve devant le bilinguisme. Oui. Là, ce sont les éléments de réponse à la première question. Mais s'agissant maintenant de la deuxième question, comment on peut améliorer l'enseignement des mathématiques? Oui, on peut améliorer l'enseignement des mathématiques dans nos pratiques de classe et en faisant recours essentiellement d'abord à l'approche que je venais de vous présenter ici, l'approche par situation. Parce que là-bas, il y a maintenant des stratégies qu'on utilise. Oui, les stratégies telles qu'il faut travailler en paire, il faut aller dans les concrets, il faut utiliser, mettre l'enfant dans l'environnement qu'il vit pour qu'il puisse lier la théorie à la pratique. De cette manière-là, l'enfant comprendra essentiellement ce qu'il doit faire dans toutes les leçons des mathématiques. Étant donné que les mathématiques sont vastes, hein? Oui. C'est de cette manière-là que nous entendons comment améliorer l'enseignement des mathématiques dans nos classes respectives. Mais en tout état des choses, d'abord, la situation s'avère fondamentale. Oui. Si l'enfant n'est pas mis dans une situation problème, il ne saura pas réfléchir, il va mobiliser toutes ses ressources afin de résoudre cette situation-là. Et le travail individuel ne paye pas. Il faut toujours en groupe, en sous-groupe et en synergie. Et de cette manière-là, on pense améliorer l'enseignement des mathématiques dans nos classes. Voilà à peu près la modératrice, les éléments de réponse que j'avais à vous. Merci.
Thank you so much, Monsieur Stanislas, for that response.
C'est moi qui
Yes,
vous
thank
remercie.
you.
Merci.
We have a couple more questions that are coming in. Thank you for those who are asking the questions. We may not be able to have time to answer all of them right here, but we'll do our very best to combine some of them. And even if we get a chance to answer them in the next webinar, since this is a multi-webinar series. So could I shift gears and ask two questions to Laura Gregory from the World Bank on your presentation of the preparation for primary school teachers? So there are several interesting questions. One of them is teachers need coaches on the other side of the bridge. The practical experience during training is not enough, as most teachers don't get a mentor during their practicums. Do you have an opinion on the role of mentorship and practicums and the ongoing support to new teachers? That's one question. And the next question is, do you think that lived examples need to have more of a role in influencing policy formulation in the decision-making level? So this role of lived examples, real life stories. Over to you, Laura. Thank you.
Thanks, Marianne. And would you mind if I actually answer a couple of other little questions I've seen come up just very briefly? And
yes, please.
If that's okay. And jumping on the mathematics one, which is really interesting. I think in our study, we found that the pre-service for primary school teachers, many across the world, many people wanting to do primary school teaching are not that comfortable with mathematics, and many of them have a fear of mathematics actually. So I think that is an area you have to focus on in pre-service and initial teacher education, building that confidence of those student teachers, which can be done through that idea of sort of relearning. If something filled them with fear and they couldn't grasp some of the concepts the first time around when they were at school. So in their initial teacher education programs, it should be kind of retaught. As it's retaught, they're learning, they're seeing the modeling of how it's taught and they're relearning it themselves. But also it's important we get the right people into initial teacher education. So there are a lot of systems around the world that are testing for basic maths before they come in, or there's some examples where they test them on the way out, which gives people who really want to be a primary school teacher a little bit of time to catch up with their mathematics. And so they have to just pass a test, a basic test before they graduate from the program. So I saw the comment on the mentors on the other side. Absolutely. I think if you picture back that pathway pipeline diagram we had, the point after the initial teacher education on the induction is really important. I think that is missing in some countries. The induction is a sort of formalized first couple of years of teaching. And in some countries, the initial teacher education institutions are very involved with that. So some of still sort of courses, but the idea of hand-holding in those early years, those first 2 or 3 years is crucial. Also, the idea of having that culture of mentoring of the expert, experienced teachers supporting the newer, younger teachers in the school is best, rather than too many people coming into schools. So senior teachers in the school, heads of department in some countries, or heads of lower school or something like that. So I fully agree. And it can be informal a lot of the times. I know when I was a teacher, I would learn by just sort of walking past the corridor and seeing the more experienced teachers teaching. On the lived examples, I need to think about this. I'm not sure I quite understand the question, but before I go there, there were 2 others I want to jump on. One was on the teacher motivation, and I think it is crucial, but I do think that initial teacher education has a role in helping to make the profession a sort of respected profession because of its knowledge base and expertise. And when you gain that sort of respect for the profession, I think that should hopefully build the motivation as well, and the excitement around the career. And then the other one I noticed was about how Africa could better prepare and develop teachers. So there were the 5 key principles that I showed from our study. A piece that I didn't show, which I think is a key piece for Africa and for many other countries, regions as well, is sort of, if you think of a triangle of alignment, the government, in initial teacher education institutions and the schools need to be better aligned and working together and collaborate. And that's where you get some efficiencies and some more effectiveness. And then secondly, I would say probably the big area that needs to be addressed is that more practical nature, that linking up those research faculties of education to become more practical, to know that practical research is what really matters. So the last one on the, so there was one on inclusive education, very important, and most teachers are asking for more information on inclusive education. I think what we found was that it is an element of most pre-service training courses, but it can only be a sort of small part because there is so much to include in them. So the idea of many initial teacher education institutions also provide courses that give a specialty for a teacher in the school to specialize in that and help their colleagues with inclusive education. And I think I've taken too much time, but on the lived examples, real life, was that in terms of through the initial teacher education, the examples that the students are given? I'm sorry, I'm not quite understood that question.
Yeah, the question seems to be maybe an epistemological question about what knowledge matters, where knowledge is coming from. Do you think that there's a role for lived experiences of, maybe we're talking about teachers today, what role can lived experiences, should it play in improving a policy formulation for teachers?
Right. Yeah, well, now that I understand, I love that question. I think it's really important. I think there is a lot we can learn from these empirical studies, and we've learned about the TAL and structured pedagogy, but teaching is complex and learning is complex. And there's a lot of experience and lived experience that really needs to feed. We need more ways of looking at that kind of research, the qualitative research, the bringing in that expertise from experience, of which there is a ton of that in education. So I fully agree. It needs to feed into that practical nature, making the faculties of education become more interested in qualitative research and practical studies. Yeah, I hope that covers it. Thanks.
Thank you, Laura. And I realize I didn't ask you a question from any French speaker yet, but perhaps if you could just spend just a moment on a question that we just got, that much of what we have seen is can work, is not working or catered to the realities of African countries specifically. Do you have any thoughts on that, on how we need to consider the realities of the African continent in the implementation of the improvements towards teacher development? How do we cater it to Africa?
Yeah, I would actually go even further to say that these things have to be contextualized wherever they are. In education research, you know, something is seen to be working in one area. How generalizable that is really depends on how it's been put into place in other places. So I think it's crucial that you learn from what is working in other places, but you look at understanding what's behind it, what are the principles or the concepts that underlie what's making that work, and then see how are those happening. And I think there was a good example here. The speaker on the TAL was talking about, okay, you know, we know that structured pedagogy is about having the right kind of inputs. We know that TAL is about pitching things at the right level for the students. But what does that actually mean in the classroom? Well, you need to look at what actually happens in African classrooms, in particular countries' classrooms, to see what are the small tweaks that can happen that move it towards, and I fully agree with that speaker on the engagement. There are activities that are happening. There's also an element of the teacher understanding the students, knowing their classroom better, knowing where their kids are at, and some of the parts of those initiatives that have been seen globally as successful, you can take those pieces and say, wait, how can we help teachers to better, within our own system, how can we get teachers to better understand their students? How can we get them to better engage their students? And that can all that work needs to be done locally. Building on what you have, building on the structures that are there.
Laura, thank you so much for that. Quite informative responses. I know we're running a little short. I think we have about 5 minutes left. If I could actually pose a question to Dr. Paul Kakupa, and then we'll end with a question for the speakers from UNESCO and UNICEF. So a quick question for Dr. Paul Kakupa. This is about Zambia specifically, so maybe we can zoom in on your country. The question is that free education in Zambia has actually led to a higher pupil to teacher ratio despite more recruitments of teachers. How can we address this challenge of perhaps large class sizes, and maybe with your thoughts on TARL too, if you could address the problem with the teacher-student ratio?
Thank you. And this is a big issue right now, but we are not guaranteed that we are going to have smaller class sizes. We don't have a budget for maybe more classrooms. Of course, more classrooms are being constructed through the Enhanced Constituency Development Fund. But the conversation right now should be about what teachers can do to deal with large classrooms. I was in China for my studies, for my PhD studies, and we visited schools there. Their classes were large. And so it may not be a bad thing, but effectiveness can happen if we equip our teachers well to handle the large classrooms. And one thing that is promising is what I was just presenting on TAO. For example, if we find evidence of spillover, like other learners in regular classrooms can benefit from these teachers who are trained in these strategies or pedagogical skills that have proven to work, I think we can still improve the learning outcomes for our students. But I don't see a day when our schools will have very few learners, because unless maybe free education is taken out, but the way it is right now, we just have to cope with the large numbers. But then we can bank on strategies or innovations like TAO to see how we can equip teachers to handle these. They can still actually do it. I'll come back to present my findings when I go out in the field and to see how teachers actually, especially in areas, for example, where they could be transferring these skills to their large classrooms, we'll have something to talk about in terms of what is actually happening.
Thank you so much for that, Paul. I'd like to end now with 2 questions for our speakers from UNESCO. That's Dr. Quentin Worden and Rudra from UNICEF. The first question is about UN guidelines, actually. And then the next question is more broadly about the topic. So we had a question from a French speaker, a French participant, asking about what are the UN, maybe UNESCO and UNICEF, standards for how many learners should a teacher actually supervise ideally. So what is the ideal class size for a teacher according to UN guidelines? And perhaps if you can, relate that to the realities that we face too, because we're never working with ideal situations. That's the first question, is ideal class size according to UN guidelines. And the second question is a bit broader. We see that there is work being done to improve teachers' preparation, but there's a gap then with teachers' practices. What can governments do to address that well-known and ongoing gap, even with improved teacher preparation, with their ongoing practices, where we don't see the preparation actually lifting foundational learning? So what can governments do to address the gap between preparation, even improved preparation for teachers, and their actual practices that are not helping to lift foundational learning? Quentin, would you like to go first?
I'm sure I can try. So apologize for my coughing. The first question is about class size, and I was not sure, so I just Googled it, right? And you have these wonderful AI things that give you the response right away. So actually, UNESCO does not have a specific recommendation on class size. What I want to add to that is 2 things. First, the literature is a bit mixed on the cost effectiveness of reducing class size as a good intervention to improve learning. Essentially, I mean, of course, you can have way too large class sizes, but there's a huge cost of reducing class sizes, and we are in an environment where ministries don't have a lot of money, and this is probably not the best way to improve learning. That's what the literature, I think, suggests. Now, what we need to do, and actually we got a request from one country to do that, is to try to provide specific guidance to teachers on how to manage large classes. So one country asked us to put together a manual for teachers to do that. It should be ready in in August. And this and other resources can potentially be useful. So that's the first question. On the second question, remind me again, Marianne, sorry.
What can governments do to reduce the gap between teacher preparation, even improved preparation, and actual teacher practices to lift foundational learning?
Right. So again, I mean, there's no magical bullet, but I think something Laura from the World Bank said, and probably others, is that both in pre-service and in in-service training, we need to give much more emphasis on practice, right? A lot of the literature emphasizes the benefits of having seasoned teachers observe what more junior teachers do, and to provide advice. I still remember a study I did a few years ago. This was about Latin America. It was an organization called Fe y Alegría that has a very, very good reputation. And one of the things I found the most interesting was the very strong coaching that was provided for the new teachers when they come in to a school on helping them adapt, improve their pedagogy, and so on. So practice, practice, practice. I mean, we are not the only one saying that. That's at a very broad level. That's the recommendation I think that we want to emphasize. In what we do at the UN, I mean, we are trying to do that. We also have to realize that it's costly to provide teacher training, and I think that we have to find a way to use e-learning options in a much more systematic way. And again, not too theoretical, but with very practical examples. So I think about one of the things we are doing now. I mean, we have had for a bit of time an e-learning platform, which will have about 7, 8 new courses there within, I think, 2 months now, because we did them ready for a project. And those are very practical courses that teachers can take. It's not theory, it's really how do you get A, B, C, D done. So I think we need to emphasize that as well. So back to you, Marianne.
Thank you, Quentin, for that. It is useful. I know we're running a little short on time, but I do see that, yes, I see that Monsieur Stanislas has his hand up. Monsieur Kanjimba, would you like to come in and answer that question?
Effectivement, Monsieur Odon, je voulais seulement donner un élément additionnel par rapport à tout ce que vous venez de dire là. Quand nous voyons la taille de l'école ou bien la taille de la classe, généralement, ici chez nous, c'est 25 au minimum, mais 55 au maximum. Mais avec l'effet de la gratuité qui a été décrété par les gouvernements, et c'est vrai que nous avons des effets induits de cette gratuité-là. Il y a maintenant pléthore dans les salles de classe. Et quelle approche faut-il utiliser pour encadrer ces enfants et pouvoir leur donner ce qu'ils doivent? Maintenant, on utilise l'approche à large effectif. Il y a une approche que nous avons toujours utilisée où les enfants sont regroupés, mais on choisit ceux qui sont un peu intelligents, qui doivent encadrer les autres, de manière à pouvoir occuper tout le monde. Parce que jusque-là, on ne sait pas encore construire d'autres écoles, mais on veut que tout le monde soit à l'école. Mais pour donner une solution palliative, on fait recours à cette stratégie qui essaie un peu de donner, mais les résultats n'est pas tellement bon. Mais si nous rentrons dans les normes où une classe au minimum a 25 élèves, au maximum 55 élèves, je pense que l'encadrement de ces enfants sera meilleur et même la qualité des apprentissages sera bonne. Ce sont là les 2 éléments que je voulais ajouter sur ce que M. Odon venait de dire là. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much for that input, Monsieur Kanjimba. Back over to you, Camelia.
Thank you very much, Marianne, for leading the Q&A session, and I'm glad that we were able to ask a lot of the questions from the participants and get really fruitful answers. Since we're running very close to the end, I'm pleased to say that we have Dr. Valentino Zimpita to give a short reflection about this whole session. And I'm sure you have learned a lot as well as I did. So Dr. Zimpita, could you please share what you have learned from today? And
OK,
Dr.
merci beaucoup. Je crois qu'il y en a un mot comme en plusieurs. Et je voudrais d'abord remercier l'organisation et la tenue de Moi, je connaissais et de tout ce que je viens d'apprendre, en tout cas, c'est meilleur. Nous aimerions aussi tenir aussi des organisations comme ça dans les jours à venir. Ça pourra toujours contribuer à notre métier d'encadrement des enfants et des enseignants sur terrain. À vous les organisateurs. Merci.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Kanjiba. And Dr. Zimpita from Malawi.
Thank you very much. Actually, I was failing to unmute because it appears I did not have that right to unmute. So thank you very much. Finally, I think you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
I think one of the comments said this is a buffet of presentations. So my summary is based on that one. It has been a very wonderful thing, entitled Ensuring that Learners Acquire the Skills They Need, the Role of Teachers. I think what has transpired is that learners need skills for their future success, starting from foundational learning, foundational skills. And we've also noted that learning poverty is high, but in sub-Saharan Africa, it's even higher. In which case, I think we have more to do if we are to equip with our learners with skills. However, it has transpired that it's not availability of resources that matters for us to equip students with skills. It goes beyond the available resources. So we can have computers, classrooms, books, etc., etc. But studies here have shown that that is not enough. What is it that we need? So we are told that in accordance, in line with the title of the session, teachers are very critical if we are to equip our learners with skills. But these teachers are not ordinary teachers, teachers who are well-rounded, professionally equipped, pedagogically advanced, ethically advanced as well. That's the type of teacher that we need. And we've gone further to learn that these teachers require subject matter knowledge. They require pedagogical expertise. And this pedagogy should look at different things, including how to manage big classes, how to manage students at different levels. And these teachers must have ethical values. But when this has happened in the teacher training, that's not enough. We are also told there is need for these teachers to relearn, because what they get in the colleges might not be adequate. So there is need for them to relearn, re-equip themselves with the professional skills. And this can be done through such avenues like CPDs. We've heard what is happening in Zambia. And these teachers, for them to do the work right, they must teach at right level, using all available approaches and resources. They should meet a student where he is, where the student is. So teach at the right level. However, as we are teaching at the right level, we've also been taught that it can work depending on conditions, but it can also fail. In which case, the teacher should not be a robot. It should be somebody who can understudy the situation, understudy his or her students, and treat them, teach them accordingly. That's very, very important. So from the keynote presentation, I think there was an emphasis on the significance, the benefits of foundational learning, which challenges us that we have a lot of work to do, starting from the foundational level. And that entails that we should equip the teacher right from the foundational level. And that for effective learning, the keynote address also talked about the pedagogical effectiveness of teachers, and that training should be practical, and that there is need for practical leadership, which should include women. Women should be given slots in those leadership positions. And summarizing it, I think ICBA UNESCO said they are available where we might need some support here and there. They are available. In short, that's what I would say. The presentations today have focused on. Thank you very much for the opportunity you gave me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zimpiba, for your really thoughtful reflection about today's session. So I would like to conclude this journey, this 2-hour journey you have with us on foundational learning. We have learned quite a lot from our speakers. So the next webinar session, it will be on August the 7th, also at 3 p.m. in East Africa, which will be 12 in West Africa for Côte d'Ivoire, Senegal, and beyond. The next session will focus on school leadership. So if you'd like to join us, please don't forget to sign up. Lastly, please also take the survey my colleague has shared again in the chat box. Sorry about the technical issues. Now it's being solved. So please share with us your thoughts about the webinar sessions and how we can improve so that we'll have a great learning journey together. Thank you to all, and we hope to see you next time. Bye. Thank you so much, Laura.